I never thought a mundane Tuesday night could change how I see someone, but here we are. So, picture this. I'm lugging my laundry basket, already dreading the hours between folding and waiting for machines to finish their cycles. I usually keep to myself in the laundry room because, well, who wants to socialize when you're surrounded by damp socks and detergent fumes? But this time, something totally unexpected happened. I was halfway through loading my clothes into one of the washers in the dimly lit corner of our apartment building's laundry room when I heard it singing. Not the off-key background humming you sometimes catch when someone's just trying to pass time. No, this was full on, like the guy was belting out a song from a musical or something, with real emotion and some surprising talent. The voice was smooth, a bit rough around the edges, and honestly way better than I expected from anyone in our building. Curiosity got the better of me, so I slowed down, pretending to check my phone, but really just listening. The guy was standing by one of the dryers, nodding his head and swaying slightly, completely in his own world. And I realized I recognized him. Jake. Jake's the kind of guy who's always been a little mysterious in the building. He's got this quiet confidence, wears those vintage band tees, and has this subtle smile that makes you wonder what he's thinking about. We've exchanged nods and brief hellos before, but nothing more than that. This wasn't just some casual sing-along either. His voice filled the cramped space in a way that made me stop and actually want to listen. I found myself inching closer, trying to figure out what song he was singing, but I didn't want to interrupt. Didn't want to ruin this unexpected moment. Then, just as he hit a high note, he turned around, caught me right there, standing awkwardly by the detergent shelf, phone in hand, probably looking like an idiot. Instead of looking embarrassed or annoyed, he smiled and, without missing a beat, said, "You want to join?" That's when everything shifted, and honestly, I had no clue what I was getting into. I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Join?" I stammered, half laughing, because, honestly, this felt like one of those moments in a cheesy movie where the shy guy gets invited to sing karaoke by the cool guy. Only this was the laundry room, and the only audience was a couple of humming dryers. Jake nodded, still grinning that easy, genuine smile that made my heart do this weird flip-flop thing. Yeah, come on, I don't bite. Unless you want to sing a duet. He tilted his head like it was the most natural thing in the world to invite a total stranger, well, not really a stranger, but you know what I mean, to sing with him in a laundry room at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. For a second, I debated just walking away, pretending I had to, check on my laundry or something. But the curiosity was stronger than my usual awkwardness, and I figured, why not? It's not every day you stumble into a moment like this. So, I shuffled over, setting my basket down quietly and asking, "What are you singing?" He grinned wider. "It's from this musical called Dear Evan Hansen. You've heard of it?" I shook my head. "Can't say I have." Jake shrugged, looking like he was about to explain, but then caught himself. Instead, he said, "I guess it's kind of my thing. Helps me unwind. You?" "Me? I'm more of a humming in the shower kind of guy," I admitted, feeling a bit self-conscious. "Well then, it's settled. You hum, I sing. Or maybe you surprise me." He winked, and honestly, I felt my face heat up. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out this tiny speaker, the kind you can carry anywhere. He hit play, and the soft intro of a song started filling the room again. Then, without any hesitation, he launched into the chorus, his voice clear and full of this raw emotion that made the words land deep in my chest. I stood there, feeling kind of ridiculous, until he caught my eye and nodded like, "Your turn." Taking a deep breath, I decided to at least try humming along. The song was beautiful, and though I wasn't exactly a pro, I found myself relaxing. Jake smiled like I'd just passed some unspoken test, and it felt nice. We kept going like that, him singing, me humming, sometimes joining in on a line or two. The whole laundry room suddenly felt less like a chore station and more like a tiny stage just for the two of us. The hum of the machines faded into the background, and for a moment, it was just us. This weird little bubble of music and laughter, and something that felt like the start of a connection. When the song ended, Jake looked at me and said, You're better than you think. I laughed, shaking my head. You're setting the bar pretty low, man. He shrugged, but his eyes were warm. Maybe, but I mean it. You've got a good vibe. Before I could reply, the dryer beeped, breaking our little moment. Jake grabbed his laundry, still smiling, and said, "Same time next week?" I usually sing Tuesdays. It's my therapy. I felt this weird, unexpected hope flare up inside me. Yeah, I think I could get used to that. And just like that, the laundry room didn't seem like such a boring place anymore. Maybe, just maybe, it was where something new was starting to happen. The following Tuesday, I found myself walking to the laundry room with a weird mix of excitement and nerves. It felt ridiculous, like I was a teenager waiting for someone to show up so we could share a secret handshake or something equally awkward. But I couldn't help it. Jake had this way of making something as banal as laundry feel like an event. I pushed the door open, and, sure enough, he was there. Same spot by the dryers, headphones around his neck, headphones he was clearly ready to ditch the moment he saw me walk in. He gave me a nod that felt more like a smile, the kind that says, "Hey, I'm glad you came." We got our machine started, and once the familiar whirring filled the room, Jake pulled out his little speaker again. "Ready to ruin my solo debut?" he joked. I laughed. "You'll have to carry me through." We dove into the playlist he'd queued up, and this time, I felt a little braver. The awkwardness from last week faded, replaced by that weird thrill when you're sharing something personal with someone for the first time. Jake sang like no one else was around, and honestly, I was kind of mesmerized. Watching the way he closed his eyes when he hit certain notes, the way his whole body moved with the rhythm, it was impossible not to get pulled in. At one point, he glanced over and caught me humming along. "See? You're learning," he teased. "Don't get too confident." I shot back with a grin. After a couple of songs, we caught each other's eyes, and that's when something shifted. The air between us got heavier, like the space had shrunk, and suddenly I noticed little things I hadn't before. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the way his voice got softer when he smiled, the way his eyes held this quiet kindness that made me want to just sit there and soak it all in. "Hey," he said quietly, voice dropping just a notch. "You ever think about trying out for anything? Like, singing-wise?" I shrugged, feeling heat creep up my neck. "I don't know. I've always thought I'd be terrible at it." Jake shook his head. "You're selling yourself short. You've got the vibe. Maybe you just need the right crowd." I cut him off, half joking. "Well, you're a pretty intimidating crowd." He chuckled, but then his expression got softer. "That's the point, to push you a little. Besides, I think you're better than you think. Maybe you don't see it yet." It was the kind of thing that made your chest tighten, that made you want to smile and cry all at once because it felt so rare and real. We finished the laundry, folding clothes side by side, our hands occasionally brushing, each touch sending these little jabs of electricity up my arm. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the way his eyes flicked to mine, like he was trying to figure me out or maybe daring me to say something. Finally, as I folded a t-shirt, I blurted out, "Would you want to grab a coffee sometime?" Like, outside the laundry room? Jake looked surprised, but in a good way. He smiled that easy, disarming smile again. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers right there, amidst the hum of machines and detergent scents. I felt like I was floating as I walked back to my apartment, the usual dread of laundry day replaced with this strange, thrilling anticipation. That night, I kept replaying everything in my head. The way Jake's singing had filled the room, how he'd invited me in without hesitation, how natural it felt to be around him. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had started, something I hadn't expected but was more than ready to explore. Over the next few weeks, our laundry nights became a ritual. We sang, we laughed, we talked about everything from music to childhood memories to the weird quirks of our apartment building. The conversations felt easy, like sliding into a warm bath after a long day. One night, after we'd finished singing, Jake looked at me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find someone to share this with. Singing, I mean." I shrugged, feeling a little shy. "I think it's better with an audience." He smiled, then reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead. "Yeah, better with you." And just like that, I realized I wasn't just coming down to the laundry room to pass time anymore. I was coming because I wanted to see him, to be near him. I don't know where this is going yet, but that's the thing about moments like this. They start small, in the most unexpected places, and before you know it, they become the reason you look forward to tomorrow. After that night, things started to unfold in this slow, steady way that felt completely natural, like we were both figuring out an unspoken rhythm between us. Our laundry room concerts became this little sanctuary where the outside world, with all its noise and stress, melted away. It was just Jake, me, and whatever playlist he'd thoughtfully curated for the evening. One week, I showed up early, arms full of laundry, and found Jake already there, setting up his speaker with this intense focus that made him look kind of adorable. As soon as he spotted me, his face lit up, and I felt that familiar warm pull in my chest. "Hey, you're early," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Got tired of sitting around waiting for you to start the show," I teased, trying to sound casual but failing to hide how happy I was to see him. He laughed, the sound low and genuine, and it felt like a secret just between us. We started our usual routine, loading machines, picking songs, exchanging those small smiles that somehow said more than words ever could. But this time, there was a shift. Midway through a song, Jake stopped singing and looked at me with a sudden seriousness. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot," I said, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach for reasons I didn't want to analyze too much. He hesitated for a second, then went on. "Do you ever get scared? Like, about things with people? Opening up, I mean." I blinked, caught off guard by the question, but also relieved it wasn't just me carrying the weight of this uncertainty. "Yeah," I admitted. More than I'd like to admit sometimes. It's just hard to know if someone's really there for you or if you're just setting yourself up to get hurt. Jake nodded slowly, the soft glow of the overhead light casting shadows across his face. "Exactly, that. I've been feeling that a lot lately. But with you, it's different. Like, maybe I don't have to be so guarded." I swallowed the lump in my throat and reached out, my hand finding his. It was a small gesture, but it carried everything I wanted to say and couldn't quite find the words for. "I feel the same way." For a few moments, we just sat like that, hands intertwined, the noise of the machines filling the silence with a kind of gentle background hum. Then Jake squeezed my hand and grinned. "You want to make this official? Like, not just laundry buddies?" I laughed, partly because the phrase laundry buddies was somehow perfect, and partly because, yes, I absolutely wanted to. Yeah, definitely. That night marked a turning point. Our casual meetups slowly became dates. Coffee turns into dinner, dinner into long walks around the neighborhood, and those walks into late-night talks that stretched until the streetlights flickered off. We learned about each other's quirks, fears, and dreams. Jake told me about his struggle with anxiety, how singing was his way to cope, and how he never really thought he'd find someone who saw past that. I shared my own stories, how I'd always felt like I was hiding parts of myself, afraid of judgment but craving connection. It was like peeling back layers, each conversation bringing us closer to something real and honest. One Saturday, Jake invited me over to his apartment. It was small but cozy, with walls covered in vintage concert posters and shelves filled with books and records. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I was entering a part of his world that he'd been hesitant to share before. He made coffee while I looked around, spotting a guitar resting in the corner. "You play?" I asked. He shrugged. "A little. Not as well as I sing, though." I grinned. "Want to show me sometime?" He nodded, and that night he played me a song he'd written, a soft, haunting melody that made me realize just how much he trusted me. I could hear every emotion in his voice, every unspoken hope and fear wrapped up in the chords. Afterward, we sat close on his couch, the silence between us comfortable and charged at the same time. I reached out, fingers brushing his cheek, and he leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly. "Jake," I whispered, "I'm really glad you asked me to join you in the laundry room that night." He smiled, that same warm smile that had drawn me in from the start. "Me too." It was the best wrong turn I've ever taken, and as we sat there, surrounded by the soft glow of the city lights outside his window, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected places can lead you exactly where you're supposed to be. After that night at Jake's place, things began unfolding in a way I hadn't quite anticipated. we started spending more time together outside the laundry room routine. Not just quick coffee stops or casual hangouts, but real moments that felt like the beginning of something deeper. One evening, a few weeks later, Jake invited me over again. This time, he hinted at wanting to cook for me, which was surprising because he had this reputation for living solely on takeout and instant noodles. I showed up to his apartment and found him wielding a frying pan with a kind of determined focus that made me smile. "I'm not great at this, so forgive me if I burn the place down," he said, handing me a glass of wine. I laughed. "I trust you won't. Worst case, we order pizza." As he cooked, we talked about silly things, bad movies we loved, embarrassing childhood stories, favorite bands, and the room felt cozy in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. When the food was finally ready, we sat at his tiny kitchen table, and for the first time, it felt less like a date and more like two people sharing a quiet evening, just being themselves. After dinner, I helped him clean up, and as we stood side by side at the sink, our hands brushed again. This time, the touch lingered, and I caught the way his eyes searched mine, like he was trying to read my thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" Jake's voice was soft but steady. "Anything," I replied, my heart beating a little faster. "Do you think we're moving too fast?" I paused, surprised by the question. Honestly, I hadn't really thought about it that way until he brought it up. But looking at him, I realized I didn't care about too fast or too slow. I cared about being with him, in this moment and whatever came next. "No," I said finally. "I think this feels right, like something I didn't know I was missing until I found it." He smiled, relief washing over his face. "Good, because I feel the same." That night, after I left his apartment, I walked home under a sky dotted with stars, feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't just about the music or the laundry room concerts anymore. It was about this connection that had grown quietly but fiercely between us. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a rhythm that fit us. We still kept our Tuesday nights sacred in the laundry room, our impromptu stage. But we also explored the city together, discovered new favorite coffee shops, and introduced each other to old friends. With every shared laugh and lingering glance, I found myself falling harder, though we both kept it unspoken at first. One night, we were sitting on Jake's couch, the glow of his city lights filtering through the windows. He pulled out his guitar again and started playing a melody I recognized from our first night there. Without looking up, he said, "There's something I've been wanting to tell you." I leaned in, suddenly nervous. "What's that?" He set the guitar aside, reached for my hand, and held it gently. "I think I'm falling for you. More than just the laundry room singing partner or the late-night coffee buddy. I'm falling for you, and it scares the hell out of me because I haven't felt this way in a long time." My chest tightened with emotion, and for a moment, I couldn't find words. Then I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm falling for you too. Scared or not, it feels like the best thing that's happened to me in a while." He grinned, that genuine, heart-melting grin, and pulled me closer until our foreheads touched. The world outside faded again, and all that mattered was the warmth between us. That night marked a new chapter, not just in our relationship, but in how I saw myself. I realized that sometimes, the most unexpected places, like a cramped laundry room, could be the start of something beautiful. And that taking a chance on a guy singing alone in the middle of the week was maybe one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Now, when I do laundry, I don't dread it. Instead, I think about Jake, the way his voice fills the room, and the way he makes even the most ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Because sometimes, love shows up in the last place you'd expect, and when it does, you just have to join in the song. Things between Jake and me felt like they'd settled into a comfortable groove, you know? The kind that's not flashy or overly dramatic but feels real, steady, and promising. But like any new relationship, there were those little moments where I'd catch myself wondering how all this started, how a simple invitation in a laundry room could lead to this. One Thursday evening, Jake and I were sprawled out on his couch after a long day. The city's nighttime hum was just faint enough outside the window for us to hear. I was half listening while scrolling through my phone when Jake suddenly sat up, a mischievous glint lighting up his eyes. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't come down to sing that night?" he asked. I looked over at him, curious. Honestly, I don't think I ever gave it much thought. I guess I was just going through the motions, doing laundry, thinking about how boring life was. He nodded thoughtfully. Same. I was in this weird place, kind of stuck. Singing was my escape, but I never imagined I'd find someone who'd want to join in. I smiled. Well, I'm glad I did. Jake grinned, then reached over and tangled his fingers with mine. Me too. There was something about those simple words and that easy touch that made me feel like I'd found home. But even in that warmth, I could sense a flicker of something unspoken. Like there were parts of Jake's story he hadn't fully shared yet. A few days later, we decided to skip the laundry night and instead went for a walk in the park near his place. The air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath our feet, and there was a quietness to the night that made everything feel a little more intimate. We found a bench under a street lamp, and as we sat, Jake suddenly got serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, voice low. I turned toward him, suddenly alert. "What's up?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. I haven't told many people this, but before I started singing in the laundry room, I went through a pretty rough patch. I was dealing with some heavy anxiety and depression, and honestly, I didn't think things would get better. My heart clenched a little. I'd heard bits and pieces about his struggles, but hearing it directly from him in that quiet moment made it feel real and raw. Singing was the only thing that helped me breathe again, he continued. It wasn't just about music. It was about finding a way to feel alive when nothing else made sense. I reached out, squeezing his hand gently. "Thank you for telling me that. That means a lot." He looked at me, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I guess I was scared you'd think it made me weak." I shook my head firmly. "No way. It makes you brave. And I'm glad you shared it with me." We sat in silence for a while, letting the night wrap around us. For the first time, I understood just how much those moments in the laundry room meant to him, and how much more there was beneath the surface. Over the next week, I found myself paying closer attention to the little things. The way Jake sometimes looked tired even when he smiled. The way he'd take a deep breath before starting a song, like summoning courage. I realized that our singing sessions weren't just fun distractions. They were part of his healing, and now, in a way, part of mine. One night, after we finished folding laundry together, Jake looked at me and said softly, "You've changed everything for me." I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. "You've changed me too." He leaned in, and when our lips met, it was gentle and sure, a promise wrapped up in a quiet moment. From then on, our bond deepened, not just through music or shared routines, but through trust and openness. We talked more about our fears, our pasts, and what we wanted from the future. There were awkward confessions and silly jokes, moments of tenderness, and the occasional argument that always ended with us holding each other a little tighter. One evening, as we were curled up watching a movie, Jake turned to me with a shy smile. "Remember when I asked you to join me in the laundry room?" I laughed. "How could I forget? Best random invitation ever." He took my hand, squeezing it. I was nervous that night. Singing alone felt lonely, but having you there, it made all the difference. I felt a lump in my throat. "You make all the difference, Jake." And honestly, that's the thing about finding someone who sees you in the middle of your mess and still chooses to stay. You realize that maybe all the laundry, the late nights, and the unexpected songs were just the beginning of something truly worth holding on to. A few weeks after that night on the couch, things between Jake and me felt comfortable, but also full of this quiet energy, like there was something just beneath the surface waiting to come out. I caught myself watching him more often, noticing the little quirks, the way he'd tuck his hair behind his ear when he was thinking, or how his fingers drummed against the coffee mug when he was nervous. There was something so intriguing about him, something that made me want to know every piece of his story. One Friday evening, Jake invited me to a small open mic night at a coffee shop a few blocks from his place. He said he'd be singing, and maybe I could come cheer him on. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'd never been to one of those shows before, and honestly, the thought of him performing in front of strangers made me nervous on his behalf. When we arrived, the place was cozy but packed with people. The smell of espresso mixed with the soft murmur of conversations created this warm, inviting atmosphere. Jake looked calm but focused as we found our seats near the front. When his turn came, he took the stage with that same quiet confidence I'd come to know, and the room seemed to fall away as he sang. His voice held this gorgeous mix of vulnerability and strength, like every note was a piece of his soul laid bare. Watching him up there, I realized how much courage it took, how much he was risking by sharing himself so openly. When he finished, the crowd erupted in applause, and I cheered louder than anyone, feeling this swell of pride I hadn't expected. Afterwards, as we walked home under the streetlights, Jake's hand found mine. "Thanks for being there," he said softly. I squeezed his fingers. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That night, our conversation drifted to dreams and fears. Jake confessed that he'd always wanted to write his own songs, but had been too scared to share them. I told him about my own hesitations, how I'd avoided opening up because of the possibility of getting hurt. We promised to support each other in pushing past those fears. The next few days were a whirlwind of creativity. Jake started writing more, scribbling lyrics on napkins and humming melodies whenever he thought no one was listening. I found myself humming along, even attempting to put words to his tunes, which made him laugh every time. One evening, while we were sitting on his fire escape, the city lights blinking around us, Jake looked over and said, "Want to hear something I wrote for you?" My heart skipped a beat. Absolutely. He pulled out his phone and played a soft recording, his voice raw and tender. The lyrics spoke about finding light in unexpected places, about someone who showed up when he least expected it and changed everything. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me." Jake rested his head against mine. "You inspire me." There was something so intimate about that moment, the way the city buzzed beneath us, but we were suspended in this bubble of connection. As the weeks rolled on, our relationship deepened. We had our moments of doubt and frustration, like any couple, but those were overshadowed by the laughter and the growing trust between us. One night, after a particularly long day, Jake surprised me by showing up at my apartment with a takeaway dinner and a grin. I figured you could use a break. We ate on my couch, talking about everything and nothing, and when he reached for my hand again, I felt a surge of warmth. "I'm really glad you asked me to join you in that laundry room," I said quietly. Jake smiled, eyes twinkling. "Me too." It was funny how something as ordinary as laundry could lead to this unexpected love, this partnership that felt like home. And as I looked at Jake, I knew I was ready for whatever came next, as long as we faced it together. There was this night not long after, when everything felt so peaceful it almost didn't seem real. Jake and I were back in the laundry room, the place where it all began, folding clothes side by side like we'd done 100 times before. The hum of the machines was familiar, comforting even, but this time it was different. We weren't just two people passing time, we were something more. I looked over at him, his face glowing in the soft fluorescent light, and something inside me clicked. All the small moments, the late night talks, the nervous songs, the shared fears, they'd led us here. Not to some grand movie-style declaration, but to a real, honest place where two people had found each other in the middle of ordinary life. Jake caught my gaze and smiled that easy smile that made my heart skip. "You know," he said, folding a shirt with a little flourish, "I never thought I'd be this happy just doing laundry." I laughed, shaking my head. "Me neither." He reached out, taking my hand in his, fingers gently lacing together. "Thanks for saying yes to that first song." "For joining me." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth spread through me. "Thank you for asking." We stood there for a moment, two quiet guys in a tiny room, surrounded by spun clothes and detergent, but feeling like we were exactly where we were meant to be. Walking home that night, I felt this deep sense of gratitude, not just for Jake, but for the unpredictable way life can surprise you when you least expect it. Sometimes, love doesn't roar in with fireworks. Sometimes it sings softly in a laundry room, and if you're lucky, someone invites you to join in, and when you do, everything changes.